Hello, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. I guess some of the restrictions are starting to lessen around the world with respect to the virus and lifting some forms of social distancing. I don't know. I always look at the deeper metaphorical things happening, and I know a lot of other teachers are doing the same. In some respects, it feels like we're coming back again to what is essential. And I've been talking about this in the last few episodes, just like what is underneath this? What is the greater invitation? What is the greater offering? What's the healing gesture? I'm working through that myself, but it was really interesting to talk to Julianne. She is a somatic sexologist and an international women's holistic health and spiritual life coach. And so we'll get into what somatic sexology is and how she happened upon that path. But I decided to name this episode, When You're in Your Body, You're Ungovernable. It sounds a little rebellious, and it really isn't meant to be that way. It's just that as women, we're carrying multiple generations worth of trauma in our DNA. And a lot of it involves our bodies, and namely our sexuality. Innate sexual energy is really powerful and it's really pure. It's not the unclean, not to be trusted aspect we've been programmed to believe it is. It could really be the key to creativity if it's sourced in the right form, because it isn't just about the sex act, as we'll explain in this episode. So this new call to reintegrate, to come back into our embodied wisdom and to experience a kind of sovereignty that accesses divine feminine connection. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Julianne Vaccaro. Julianne, I'm so grateful to have you on today. I'm so excited for this discussion. I can tell it's already going to be epic.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I really want to dive into getting started with people getting to know like how you got into this, because this is such, I don't want to say it's controversial. I don't see it that way, but I think some people who are more conservative or who maybe don't understand the context of what you're about and what you teach, how powerful it actually is for the divine feminine and all of that stuff. So we'll go there. But at first, I just want you to share how this showed up for you on your path in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those listening that are resonating in that way, and this is new information, or it's kind of the first time we're hearing about it, I had the same experience. I never valued my femininity or understood what that really meant and the power behind it. And sexuality was always the thing that I put last in my life. It was something that had so much charge and shame and guilt and judgment that I never really looked at it until I was forced to, in a way. So my journey started in the health and fitness industry about 8 years ago. And I started for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to fix my body, have the most perfect body that I could. And so I wanted to try and do it from a healthy way, not knowing that it really wasn't healthy. So I tried every diet box under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I landed on raw veganism, and I was there for about 3 years, and I really loved the lifestyle. I figured, okay, I'm going to get as lean and as skinny as I can, like model skinny. And it was great until all of a sudden my body started to really just crap out on me, and my hair started to fall out. I was gaining weight. I had no energy. And I was working with an Oriental medicine doctor at the time, and she mentioned that I had really severe adrenal fatigue. So I decided to add meat back into my diet, change my diet. And that was really the first turning point for me, where I realized that you can have all of the healthy, clean foods that you want in your diet. You can eat organic, you can juice and smoothie every day, which I was doing. I was getting all of my produce and meats from farms in Florida. And it didn't matter. It wasn't the right diet for me. And I was also in a relationship that wasn't right for me either. There was nothing wrong. I wasn't happy. And so I started to realize that your emotional and spiritual health are just as important as the food that you're putting into your body. So I healed myself from the adrenal fatigue. And then I started to go really hard into the world of aesthetics. And I became a yoga teacher. I started teaching boxing and kickboxing, and I worked at UFC gym for about 4 years. So I was very much in my inner masculine. And then I discovered bodybuilding, and I was like, that's going to be the thing. Like, I will eat chicken, broccoli, and rice all day, every day if I have this perfect body. So I competed for about 3 years and tried everything under the sun to get to this perfect image. And I was successful until all of my eating disorders came back, and the relationship that I had with my body and food were horrific. I lost all of my holistic practices. And it was one binge incident in particular where I had come home from Target trying to buy snacks that I would wait for after my show. And I just found myself like covered in peanut butter and looking at myself in the mirror, like, who are you doing this for and why? Like, what are you chasing? So that was turning point number 2, I'd say. And I decided to just embark on a whole new journey of self-love. I wanted to blend the world of aesthetics and holistic health. And at that time, there wasn't so much of a blend there. It was like you were just aesthetics or it was just holistic wellness.
So how long ago was that about?
Yeah, that was probably about 5 years ago, I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started to really try and go after the body that I wanted, like looking like a fitness competitor, but doing it from a really healthy place. And when I had stepped out of competing, I had amenorrhea. So I had lost my period for over a year. I had stopped taking any hormonal birth control because that was really messing up my system. I had developed really severe digestive issues. Like I said, my eating disorders came back, and I was struggling to find help with all of those things, like in a holistic approach. And so I just took all of the tools that I had and started to really heal from the inside out. And again, was successful. But then as I started to peel those layers back and healed the relationship with food, was doing really good with my body, with self-worth and self-image, all these other layers started to show up. And I started to find myself in the repetitive pattern of abusive relationships, substance abuse. And I saw that it was my own abuse with myself, everything, it was that pattern. So I ended an abusive relationship, the last one, that really left me with sexual trauma in a pregnancy that was intentional on his part. And that just cracked me wide open. And it was the greatest gift because it showed me my childhood trauma. It allowed me to look at the deeper limiting beliefs and the trauma that I was so wired into my body that I didn't understand yet. And it also opened the world of sexuality for me because I never really felt safe in my body or fully expressed in my eroticism, yet I really wanted to be. And so when that happened, it really took that lack of safety to a whole new level. I wasn't able to be intimate with anybody. My body would lock up. And so I was doing so much healing work. I was going to therapy. I was doing counseling. I was doing so much, but all of the things were clicking, yet my body would still freeze. And that's what led me into the world of somatic therapy and sexological body work. And that really took me to a whole new level. It was like a massive healing, sexual awakening, and really brought me back home to my body.
So interesting. I mean, I feel like for some people, some of these words are supercharged, like eroticism. I think we go straight to like, oh, dirty porn or whatever. Like for women, what would you say to a woman who is just going, I don't even know how to be an erotic. Like, I don't even know how to place that in my life. It's like,
Yeah.
what's your definition of that? When you said, you didn't know how to connect to your eroticism, and most people, I wouldn't say most, I see a lot of women are probably like, well, why would you want to do that? That's bad. I don't think that, but I know that there's a lot of women who deep down feel like, what is that? And how do I come to terms with that?
Yeah, it's a great point. And again, like that was me. I couldn't identify with the word erotic. Like it was supercharged. It made me feel really icky in my body. The word pleasure reminded me of like all of this dirty, shameful stuff. And I couldn't like say those words. It didn't feel good. And so what I realized through this process, and also for those of you listening, what I find in working with women is there's kind of this inner knowing. Like, although there's maybe this logical, cerebral thing that feels charged to that, there's also this deep desire that's like an intrigue towards being fully sexually expressed. So I think that a lot of where that comes from, the confusion and the charge, is from so much of societal programming. And there's so many facets of that. I'm working with women right now and really awakening their feminine. And so much of what I hear is I grew up in a household that had really religious, rigid beliefs. And that's not to say anything bad about religion. However, it breeds this message that sexuality is bad, right? It's only for procreation. There's no pleasure involved in it. And we're really showing up for the other person. And then on top of that, in just regular society, if you express your sexuality, maybe you're being branded in one way. And if you don't, you're a prude, right? So there's this like, how do I really show up and be sexy without being labeled one way? And so it doesn't really feel safe. I think there's a lot of confusion of how do I be a sexual being and be respected, right? So there's a lot of programming that has to play into that. And then to answer your question about the power behind it, there's such a power behind surrendering into your feminine. And sexual energy is the most powerful energy out there. It's creative energy, it's life force energy, it's manifestation energy. And so there's when we're connected with our feminine, when we're in our sexual power, we're able to receive. Like femininity by nature is about receptivity, right? Anatomically, we're receivers, men are the penetrators. And so when we're in our feminine, we're receiving abundance. We're receiving more money. We're calling in more of what we want. We're connected to our life's purpose. And when we're disconnected from sexuality and our femininity, those things are typically struggling. And it shows up in so many physical manifestations. It shows up in hormonal imbalances, food eating, like disordered food, overtraining, very much in our heads, the inability to slow down. So it shows up in a lot of different ways.
So fascinating. I've done a couple of podcasts on the deeper programming that women receive from early religious programming, or, the narratives that we're told about Eve and, that all the ills of society, basically the whole downfall of humanity came from a woman who partook of the forbidden fruit, if you will. And some people have literally made their reference of that forbidden fruit being sexuality.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter what religion, and we come from a puritanistic culture here in America. I know I have listeners all over the world, so I'm just going to say most countries at their foundation are religious. They had some kind of a start from, as for us, it was the Puritans. For England, it's so somehow, some way, sexuality became this focus or this witch hunt, I guess, against women, and the power that is generated from a woman being in her body is quite threatening to patriarchal establishments.
100%.
So you can speak a little more to that if you want. And my listeners know I'm all about that. So
sure. Yeah. I think, the recent things that I've been talking about, especially being in quarantine right now, is I find that there's so much unrealistic expectations of our productivity levels as women. And so I've been really talking about honoring our moon cycles and going with the flow of that, and how being in such a patriarchal society, we haven't really accounted for our hormones yet, right? So we're expected to produce, to show up in the same energy all of the time. And realistically, it's just not accurate to the female body. Like there's weeks, we have inner seasons. So there's weeks where we're really creative. And then there's weeks where we're really introspective. And all of that is divine. Like that's part of our nature. That's part of our superpower, our emotions, our sensitivity. And so these things are really being called to be reintegrated, and not just women, but in our society. Like you mentioned, we've been in such a patriarchal world for so long that just as a whole, we've been disconnected from our hearts. We've been disconnected from our emotions. And so I feel there's this really big calling right now to open our hearts, to come back to our bodies and to feel again, and to welcome back in that compassion and listening and receptivity. And that's, like I said, it's not just for women. We're talking about masculine and feminine, but they're just energies, they're just polarities. It's really yin versus yang, and we've been in yang for so long.
Absolutely.
And that's when we're just really, it's like being hot in summer all the time. Like that doesn't feel good. There's no rest.
It's almost like, I don't know if you've seen those memes or those, little quotes that are kind of circulating online, like Mother Earth is super mad. Everybody go to timeout. Everyone go to your room. Like that's pretty much what's happening.
Totally.
And so I love that you have this reclamation project. So you went through this whole, that's your podcast, which I'm going to be a guest on, and I'm so excited. But you went through this whole awakening that every single guest I've ever had on here, and I include myself in this, has had, I guess as an introduction to her true life path or her soul path, she's had some kind of initiation into that through a pain, a pain point or a really marked life experience that rendered her like almost unable to function until she resolved this.
Yeah.
So you got to that stage and you were just done, right? I, my listeners know this too. Like I've really tried to come to, excuse me, a middle place of just allowing everyone to have their own life path and experience and not prescribe into a one size fits all, like which a lot of religions and systems like to do and governments. But I think as I was listening to your story and as I'm kind of feeling into how wise you are right now, like you just get it, like you're in your body and you're there. It feels like there's this middle ground of neutrality where we allow people to have their own knowing, their own embodied wisdom, their own. I think that is the divine feminine, don't you? Like, it's just, why can't we all just be who we are? Why are we
Yeah.
trying to be conformists? So when I mean middle ground, I mean like, let's neutralize instead of like creating all these structures of hierarchy or, like you were talking about, this unrealistic productivity. We are designed to go into some kind of a flow or alignment where we truly have to, it's like the pendulum shifting, like we're trying to come back to center of who we are, and that has to shift, and sometimes it's super messy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, what you said before around, you said something about, I'm losing it now. You mentioned, I want to go into control. I think like, you were talking about how women, when we're really in our bodies and connected to our sexuality, like we're ungovernable. We're
I love
insatiable
that.
with sexuality.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, biologically, we have a higher sex drive. We're more sexually, ignited than men. It is biological. And I think that over the years, we've been repressed, right? We've been controlled. And it's been understood that men are the sexual ones and women are the spiritual, calm, good girls. And it's really the opposite. Like, to our natural way of being, women are the sexual ones. We have a deeper connection to our emotions. We have a really strong connection to source, and there's wisdom in that. And it's not a hierarchy. It's not that we're better than men. We have different connection points. We have different purposes. We have different energies, and they both, like, together, they are unstoppable, right? Like, we need the masculine just as much as we need the feminine. But I think that over time, it's been something that's been so controlled that we've been taught that our sexuality is bad, that we need to be in our masculine in order to be successful. And it's definitely been out of a sense of control. And such a strong illusion of the ego is like, how can we just conform everybody to the same thing? And being in our uniqueness or sharing our special gifts, like that can be threatening to so many. And so I really love the piece that you said around letting everybody just share their own individual magic and show up in that way. And it's all a creation of the divine. It's all a unique expression. And I think we're shifting and we're starting to welcome more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like too that, there's a fear that if we let everyone express who they are, we would have mass chaos. That we need to have these control structures in place or what have you. And that it's the masculine that needs to put it there. And the masculine, as you know, I'm sure, like, it's logical, it's linear, it's black and white. There's very little flow to it. It's not nuanced. And so the fear is collectively, like, the whole world would come undone if we lived from soul expression and gift expansion and inclusivity. And do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a true, I think, to the establishments, that's a massive fear.
100%. Yeah. And I think, the way that we've been living is imprinted in our body too. Just as trauma is imprinted in our body, we can carry up to 14 generations of trauma in our tissue. So, when we were talking earlier about how we used to be punished for our sexuality, being burned in the witch trials for expressing that, having to turn other women in to protect our families, like that's imprinted in our DNA. So there's no wonder it feels unsafe in our body. The way that we've been operating has also been passed down. So I think
Absolutely.
for so many women, our nervous system doesn't know how to slow down. And I think that most of us, and it doesn't have to be a really big trauma, but most of us have faced some kind of sexual trauma or sexual assault, even down to just, I said yes when I really meant no. And maybe I'm an energetic being and I've, not trusted the no in my body and I've pushed past that. That's a form of like violating our system, right? It doesn't have to be a really big sexual trauma. And so I think that then when it comes to slowing down, trusting our intuition and really being connected to ourselves, like that starts to be altered and that slowdown becomes so much harder.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And yeah, you're totally speaking my language about unprocessed trauma. I actually interviewed a woman called Dr. Valerie Ryan. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. I can't remember which episode it was, but I think it was 054. Um, she talked about patriarchal stress disorder. She's a transpersonal psychologist.
Okay.
She's practicing, and she's basically saying what you're saying. Like we, as women, we are carrying this genuine, like feminine wound that's millennia long. Um, and it's, yes, there's, intergenerational trauma, like you said, up to 14 generations of trauma in our DNA. That's a long way back, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
also the collective feminine wound for all of humanity, like that women have basically held in our bodies since the beginning of time. And maybe not, I don't know, maybe when there were matriarchal societies that was balanced out. But I feel like the women on the earth right now, we are the ones who break this cycle. And I think this time on the earth, and correct, no, back me up on this one. I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but back me up on this. Like, this is a genuine global invitation right now for women to step into all of this and heal all of this unprocessed trauma and come forward and say, it stops here. Like, there's a new way. The feminine way is the way we're going to heal.
Yeah, I agree so much. I think I happened to be, I was speaking at the Sedona Yoga Festival when, when everything with COVID hit. And I had never been to Sedona before. And so I stayed there for a little solo vacation before coming back to Denver and being there. And it feels like such a feminine space. It was such a beautiful place
I
to be.
love Sedona.
Yeah. And it was just, receiving all of this wisdom. It felt like of like, this is the thing that's going to flip, right? Like we're all being asked to go inwards, not just inside of our homes, but inside of ourselves to slow down. All of these things are going to surface. The things that we've been ignoring are going to come up and we're faced with a whole new way of living. And it's been beautiful to, like you said, feel women during this time take that invitation and really look at those things and also break free of the things that have been holding them back from truly stepping into who they really are.
Love it. So your reclamation project, your whole podcast, your whole, I guess, mission in life, because I know you're a somatic sexologist and I want you to explain what that is.
Yeah.
Really, the reclamation is about what? What would you say we're truly reclaiming? What are we
Yeah.
truly seeking
So
to reclaim?
I think a lot of it, obviously was very much inspired by my own personal journey. And so for me, reclaiming and your reclamation is reclaiming your power on every layer and level of who you are, your physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, social, sexual health. So taking back the power over your food choices, taking back the power over your movement, over your sexual expression, your relationships, the way that they look, the way that you feel in your emotions, and really being connected to your soul's purpose and living a fully authentic, expressed life. And so I think that in my own journey, so much of what I did and so much that I put my body through was because I thought I had to, right? It was because I thought that's how I would be worthy. I remember telling myself so often, well, to be successful, there is no other way. Like I have to hustle. I have to grind. I need to armor myself up because I didn't know anything else. And that was part of my path to get to where I am now. And I think that's part of, like you said, the initiation. Like it comes from our downfall, like our phoenix rising, when everything we know about ourselves just gets stripped away and we have nothing left but to rebuild
The descent.
who we really are.
It's a descent in the heroine's journey or the hero's journey. It's absolutely pivotal that we hit, quote unquote, a rock bottom in who we think we are. Because we've bought into the ideologies around us of what society or our families or whatever we are incarnated into, everything exterior, what they have told us we are.
Yes, 100%.
So we have to individuate from that. And you've done it powerfully. Like I can just see it from your picture. Like you just have that vibe going on and listening to your talk. So what is a somatic sexologist? Let's go there. I mean, somatic is of the body, correct?
Yes. So we do a lot of psychosomatics, which is involving the mind with the body. The approach that I was trained under is a combination of somatic therapy and also sexological body work. So it's two practices in one. And that's where I find there's so much transformation available because our sexuality is the core of who we are. It's where we came from. Like I mentioned earlier, it's the most powerful energy we have. And so I find that even in my own journey, like I mentioned, sexuality was the last thing that I touched. I didn't want to go there. I didn't understand the power behind it. And it felt like everything else was great. I had figured everything else out, quote unquote, right? So sexuality was the last thing. And having gone through that awakening, I realized it was the glue that held everything else together. It was like, oh, sexuality was why the eating disorders were there, why the substance abuse was there. So the combination of somatics and sexology is so powerful because it really brings you back to the truth of who you are and also unites your spirituality with your sexuality. So when we
that's powerful. Say that again. So it unites your sexuality with your physicality. It unites your sexuality with your spirituality.
Yeah. Big part of the work. I think that most of the people that find this work, like I did, had felt like, we did everything. Felt like we did all the therapy, all the kinds of processing, and we're connected to spirituality and yet weren't fully embodied. And so for many women that find this work, they think they're coming in for spiritual awakening and they have a massive sexual awakening and they unite their sexuality with their spirituality and they become fully expressed in that eroticism. And then for men, they think they're coming for a sexual awakening and really they're uniting their heart with their genitals and they bring their heart into their sex. And so it's a beautiful process of bringing those two things together.
How interesting.
Yeah.
So keep going because I have another question, but finish your thought.
Sure. So when everything is energy, that's like principle number one. And so when we experience trauma, we have a reaction, right? So it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so when, let's say we're in a dangerous situation, we experience a traumatic event and we don't have the ability to fight back and it leaves us with trauma in the body, whether it's like we're getting mugged or we're being sexually assaulted or something like that, that energy gets stuck in our body if we're not releasing it out. Like an animal, when they have a traumatic experience, they shake it out of their body and that's how they return back. And if they don't, that's not a good thing. And so with humans, we don't process that way. We need to process that way to actually release the energy and not get it stuck in the body. So what we're doing in this somatic container is allowing the body it's giving the body a safe space to go back into those incomplete, unhealed memories to then complete them or change the way that they actually went. So perhaps you were sexually assaulted. Okay, we go back into that. The body guides us there. We're not pushing you there. We're pressing into certain tension spots in the body and the memories become surfaced. I mean, things that you would never even really think were important in your life or things that you haven't thought about in 10 years get surfaced. And then we are going through that memory where you get to take your power back fully. So if there was, let's say, a rape, you get to play that out the way that you want. And we bring you into that safety so your body actually gets to complete those memories. And then with the sexological body portion, in the same way that trauma lives in the tissue and every other area of our body, it lives in our tissue and our vagina, especially as women. Our womb holds so much memory. And
Mm-hmm.
so often, even when we're experiencing things that have nothing to do with our sexuality, they can get stored there. So in my own process with this, I mean, I went through all of the relationships, all of the sexual partners that I've had, and feeling their wounds, feeling me take on their energies, and then having that be stored there. So things like painful sex, having different areas of tension or numbness, that's what we're moving through so that you can actually feel all of the pleasure that's available to you. Like, we're expanding the capacity that you have for pleasure to really come home to your eroticism, and then again unite that spirituality and sexuality, and to feel unapologetic about all of your desires and how you
Yeah.
show it, like taking the ego voice out.
That's so powerful. I mean, I know you've probably studied things like power versus force, where they can calibrate different emotional states and the energy vibration. When you said everything's energy, like usually with sexuality, the reason that it's so charged and everyone's so obsessed with it and they don't know what to do with it is because it is so powerful. But the emotion that gets attached to it oftentimes is shame, which is the lowest calibrated emotion vibrationally. And so when you're talking about like pressing on points of the body and then processing, where that memory lives in the body. I think there's a quote that says something like, the disease is written on the man somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everything is stored in our body. Everything, every experience. And like you said, even ancestrally, we can tap into that through the body. So do you have practices? I mean, I want to direct people to your offerings for sure and where to find you. I know that during this COVID time, I'm assuming that you often, you work with people one-on-one, you're actually like touching them and getting them, to do that somatic release in person. What would you say at this time to get people, because, and I want to preface that with just a deeper question. Um, I've been saying this since even before this whole COVID thing broke out, like we're going to have to enter a time on the earth where it becomes absolutely crucial, not a luxury, not a nice thing to do, meditation or these spiritual practices to get us in our bodies and to get us on the same page with our soul voice. Something would have to happen to shake that up for everyone. Now it's happening collectively. So it's now like self-care and spiritual practice is now like a must. It's a necessity to just even be here on the earth because of all the mixed messaging and things that are happening. So with that said, um, what you offer, how can where do we start, number one, and then your greater offering where you may be more limited now with your personal practice. How does that look like how has that shifted what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my business originally was online, and so I've just really broken into the in-person space. So I've done a lot of this stuff virtually. There's a lot of things and practices that you can do virtually. A lot of the talk, not talk therapy, but a lot of the logical processing that I do in my coaching sessions are also somatically based, where we're going into the body, working with inner aspects of yourself. So, the blocks that you might feel that are holding you back from living fully authentic are really inner aspects of who you are that were formed out of an adaptation of protection or safety. So, we can go in the body, and then there's also things that we can do virtually from a talk perspective as well. So for those of you that are listening that are really resonating with this, I always give self-pleasure the first thing to go into. I always say there's multiple healing containers that we have. There's things that we can heal on our own with ourselves. There's things that we heal in relationship, whether it be friendships or intimate partners. There's things we heal in communities and groups, and then there's things that we heal with practitioners. And so there's different layers of healing available for us in each of those containers. And typically the first thing we might do is with ourselves, right? So to really get the needle moving and start to explore this, self-pleasure is the first way that I really invite you to go into. And with that doesn't mean it's easy. Like, there might be things that come up there, and that's okay. I do have a free self-pleasure guide to really start your practice, to be able to have the tools. So if stuff comes up like memories or emotions that are maybe not thought to belong in pleasure or in sexual experiences, like how do we move through those? And then also, Yeah. So everything that I'm doing in person has been put off, but a lot of it we're doing online now.
Okay. I just wonder if there was an impact, but yeah, going back to that the first part of it that I was trying to talk, because it gave you like 3 questions at once. But it was basically like it's no longer just a luxury or a thing to maybe put in your day. It's like brushing your teeth now. It's like, getting within. So how would you, what are your best practices or ways for, I mean, you talked about self-pleasure, and that's definitely a way to somatically connect with your sexuality. A lot of women have resistance to that. I interviewed 2 female psychologists and practicing psychologists who were talking about this very thing. Like they say it's just a personal choice. I mean, because we've had so much dogma thrown at us around that being so evil and dark and all of these things and addictive and things like that. So, um, with that, what would you say are your best practices to just immediately get in your body? Because again, when you're in your body, you're ungovernable.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not only attaching right to your sexual force energy, but you're attaching to what else? Like, what else is there that is going to make you this sovereign? My favorite
Yeah.
word.
So there's so much more research being done about female sexuality now. I really feel like we've just hit the surface, but there's like the way we're connected with our sexuality, when we're having orgasms, when we're connected to our sexual power, we are more creative. We are more sociable. The skills that are important for leadership start to flourish. So we have more of a voice. We stand in our truth. We're connected to our soul's purpose, our highest self. And so it's not just this like woo-woo thing where, yeah, okay, I'm feeling sexy in my sexual power. There's a connection to our throat chakra, our heart chakra. So the more open we are in our sexuality, just embracing that like what I mean by the word open is embracing that and fully owning that, the more open our heart is, the more connected we are to our loving energy. And we're living more from that place versus fear and contraction. So,
That
so
makes
there
a
is,
lot of sense. It's like
yeah.
it's like they teach in yoga with to soften and open is
Mm-hmm.
that feminine, right? It's if you want to get into the yoga pose, you have to breathe and just picture the softening and opening so you can get into those poses. I would imagine it's the same life force energy with your sexuality. I think where many women would have resistance because of the programming is that she's going to go out of integrity. She's going to have multiple sex partners. She's going to become whatever promiscuous. I don't know the word. Like that's the old group think around a woman really being a sexual sovereign, if you will.
Yeah. And I think those questions are valid. I feel that in a lot of the women that I work with and my own self, there's this point where you reach an exploration where it's like, there's scared, there's fear. There's this point where you're like, oh my gosh, am I really allowed to be this big? Can I actually take up this much space? And there's almost this tiny bit of contraction. And then there's a big boom in the bigness. But it's like the fears and the goals are the same thing. I want to fully embrace my sexuality and step into who I am, but I'm really scared of doing that because it has felt unsafe. And again, it goes back to like what's imprinted in our DNA. And so I think that, does that kind of answer it? It wasn't too much of a question.
No, that's really good. I think it's just, again, for women who are on the path of trying to self-actualize and be in integrity and in alignment with their own soul voice and just being, part of being a sovereign is being responsible. So I think, like I said, the other end of the spectrum is just like utter abandon, like I can do whatever I want or whatever. And just teaching the containment around that energy, I think is really powerful. It's more powerful than anything.
Yeah. And I think that typically what, you mentioned pendulum before, what I find is that often if we've been really restricted and repressed, the pendulum swings to the other side, but it always balances out. And if you're listening and you're worried about those things, there's nowhere that you have to be on your journey. Like you can start wherever you are and take those, whatever steps feel most comfortable for you, that there's no expectation of where you need to be. It doesn't mean you have to be with multiple sex partners or, whatever we're making it to seem like you can make it your own, right? That's the whole part of this, is like your unique expression. So I think what can be valuable is to look at what the fears are, and feel them, and look at them with a level of curiosity, and also know that like you don't have to go any farther than where you want to.
Mm-hmm. And I have often heard it said that your sexuality is not for your partner, it's for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I've heard multiple people talk about this, that's the old programming, is like when you are in a committed marriage or relationship, what have you, that you are one, and therefore, that person has some kind of quote unquote claim on your body. And this is still happening all over the place. This is happening crazily in many systems and nations and cultures and subcultures, that women are the property of the partner. Um, and I think what you're saying is so powerful, because this reclamation is, I am fully here. I'm fully rooted to the earth. I am in my body. This is who I am. And I choose. I choose who enters the domain of my soul space, if you will. So, okay. With, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this, because this has been so fascinating. Uh, you're talking about things like honoring moon cycles, and going from the opposite of like the masculine paradigm of, increasing productivity and that defining your worth and making you a better person, and go, set goals. So paint us the scenario of a way to be in your own feminine sovereignty, in your own, divine feminine flow, your sexual force energy. Like you said, there's increased creativity there. So show us what that looks like any day, week, month, or whatever, to be in a space where you're walking the earth as this ungovernable, where you are the governess, if you will, of your own life domain.
I like that word, governess. Yeah. So I think the first thing that I like to explain is what it really looks like to lead from the feminine. I think when I first started hearing that, I'm like, to describe it is first really grounding yourself in your body, connecting with silence, with stillness, and moving slowly, right? And being open and receptive to listening, like listening to the guidance, listening for your highest self, listening for the words of the divine spirit, God, whomever you believe in, and connecting with that. And that's where our power lies, is by listening for that. Like we've received that. We don't have to think our way through things. That would be the very masculine logical way of like, let me do this because this is how it should go, or this is because someone told me how to do this. So really moving out of that and moving into our homes, which is our body, receiving that guidance, and then taking inspired action and standing in your power with that, and being so connected to that wisdom and to that knowing, and following through. So stillness, slowness, receiving that guidance, and then taking that inspired action. So
just that beautiful, healthy masculine inside of us as feminine beings is to take inspired action.
Yeah. And it's about marrying those two energies. Like I think often in awakening your feminine, you swing to the other side of the pendulum. I know it happened with me. And then maybe you're too much in flow, right? Like no matter what, if you're too much in one space, it's going to be imbalanced. And so it is about marrying both energies and having the safety and protection and structure of the masculine hold the flow of the feminine.
Beautiful. Hey, you sound like you're an advocate for my Stand, Speak, Shine school, because that is exactly what we do. We talk about receiving, being preparatory to giving, and landing in our bodies, and being that sovereign queen, and then moving to inspired action after you've received love and power from your soul and the divine. So it sounds like you have made it your personal credo or life mission to just be you. And I'm so inspired by that. I'm inspired by women who are able to break through societal norms and expectations. And it's a bold work to even talk about sexuality, like in this day and age. Like it's for some people, they're going to have that resistance. And for others, I would say en masse, the doors are going to swing wide open for us to heal this collectively because it's needed. It's a necessary part of our planetary evolution and as our individual soul expansion.
Yes.
So
Oh my
thank you
God.
for your work. So any last thoughts before we wrap up? Anything that you feel like you want to share, and tell people where they can find you as well.
I think what I would just give to end off is trust the process. Know that your process is your own process, that there might be triggering things in this, and there probably are, and it's always an invitation to go deeper. And if you're not ready to go deeper, that's okay. And to trust in that, right? And to really just set the intention. I think what I always like to give last is the reminder that everything is energy and that it really does come down to intention. So knowing that where you direct your energy is what we're going to create, and putting intention behind things to really be a deliberate creator of your reality and stepping into who you really are. And
Beautiful.
yeah, and then for as far where to find me, I love to hang out on Instagram. My handle is at Julianne Vaccaro, and then that's the same as my website, juliannevaccaro.com. My podcast is The Reclamation Project as well.
Perfect. Well, I'm so excited to share on your podcast because now I know what you're all about. We can have a juicy discussion. And so thank you so much for your time, Julianne. It's just been an amazing discussion.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, so as my conversation with Julianne sort of illustrated, we're all being asked to go inward right now. And that whole concept of like uniting your sexuality and your spirituality and the place where that lives, and seeing that energy is holy and sacred and part of the divine, I think is part of the mystery. It's just right along with that whole divine feminine thing, which in and of itself and herself is a mystery. So thanks for listening today. Remember to check out standspeakshine.com for any free offerings there. I have a free healing kit, which is just a PDF, a little lookbook I've put together for ways you can nourish yourself with your senses. It's about being sensual, coming back to your senses. Have a blessed week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.